Welcome to my Ruby Slippers. I'm Lily Strong from the blog Lily Strong.
And I'm Silly Strong, her favorite middle child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will never give up that status for you.
Yay!
Our purpose is to share our stories with shared abuse, and hopefully we can reach other people and help them heal and begin their healing.
Yeah.
I chose the symbol of ruby slippers from Wizard of Oz because I feel like they're a very powerful symbol of personal agency. And I know you don't remember Wizard of Oz.
I'm too young.
Yeah.
Gen Z status.
Yeah, she crash lands in the land of Oz, and she is given these ruby slippers, and then she goes on this long winding journey on the yellow brick road on her way trying to find her way home.
Right.
When she finally gets to the end, she discovers that she just has to click her ruby slippers together 3 times, and that's the power that she needed to go home. So she had this power all along, but she didn't realize it, and she had to go through all sorts of fields of poppies and strange people and flying monkeys and all these crazy things. But in the end, she found out that she had personal agency, the power to make the best decisions for yourself.
Yeah. And I think it also works as you said, it's an analogy for personal agency, but also in the context of that story, which, going off of what you've said, it's not really her fault that she didn't know she had that, because who would think of clicking your heels together?
Exactly. That's a really good point. Our whole idea is we want to be sharing with others so that we can help you on your way.
Yeah, and just know you're not alone.
Yeah. So I have the picture on our thumbnail of my red Skechers. Those are my ruby slippers, and those are really my shoes. And it's a real picture that I took.
Yay!
And I love these shoes. I bought these shoes at the beginning of COVID, and I had them delivered to the house because you weren't supposed to be going out shopping.
Mm-hmm.
And the box came, and I was so excited about my red shoes, and I turned over the box, and on the bottom of the box it was written "No expiration." And to me, that was just so funny because shoes don't expire.
Right.
But I liked it. It was kind of like when you have a bottle of vitamins and there's an expiration date, or food has an expiration date. Right. But of course, the shoes don't have the expiration date. I still have those shoes with me today. They have not expired.
Right.
At the time, I was working as a curriculum director at a preschool, and this was my best job ever. I loved this job so much. I thought I was going to be there forever, that they were going to have to kick me out. I was never leaving. And part of my job was to train teachers. So I created a presentation about there's no expiration on children's learning.
Right. Because
if somebody doesn't learn to read by the age of 7, it doesn't mean they'll never learn.
Right.
They're just doing it in their own time and taking their own path. And I feel like that's really applicable to healing from trauma too.
Yeah.
We don't have a one-size-fits-all kind of a rule. We don't have an expiration date of, if you haven't healed within the first year, you'll never heal. There's nothing like that.
Right. Yeah. I do feel like with education, because I was an education major, and that was something that they really highlighted, is how important early literacy is. Mm-hmm. So it really is being able to read by 3rd grade is, this big predictor for whether or not they'll end up going to college or if they'll finish high school and stuff like that. And it's true, it's from data, but the way that can be phrased can be so negative.
Yes, because it's sort of formulaic.
Right.
Yeah.
And the point shouldn't be that, if you fail by 3rd grade to teach this kid to read,
give up.
Yeah, they're doomed. Right. No, they'll need extra support in the future.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how a lot of things are with outside of reading too. There's milestones that we're supposed to hit, and all of these things that it's okay, not everybody has the means to hit those milestones and like the socially correct timeline, but given the extra support afterwards and given the extra effort, you can still succeed with these things.
It kind of makes me think of your little brother. When you're a small child, they have these little developmental milestones that they check every time you go in for your well child checkup. And he was hitting them all, and then all of a sudden he started regressing, and this is when he regressed into autism. And it was kind of bizarre because, you know, he's supposed to be able to say so many words at a certain age, and he suddenly wasn't making all those milestones. And I just had no idea then what his future was going to hold.
Right.
And I had to see him grow and develop into the young man that he is. He's graduating from high school this year. He's planning on going to community college. He does know how to talk.
Oh, yeah.
And carry a conversation.
That was something that they'd said that he might be nonverbal, right?
Right.
Like forever.
Right.
I could not get this kid to be quiet and stop making jokes. Like...
Yeah. I think one of my proudest moments ever as a parent was telling him, "Can we be quiet for a moment?" It's like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and he's so independent too.
Oh, he is. But he had his own journey.
Yeah.
And I couldn't follow any prescribed roadmap to get there.
Right. But then again, there are things where, like, you know, I help teach him certain chores. You help, you know, obviously you help teach him certain chores, you know. And you do have to give the extra support of being like...
Right.
You know, this isn't something that everybody's going to think of, but, you know, I'll show you how to do it.
Right.
And it's just that extra support is needed.
And that makes me think of something else. I remember a really wise teacher, she told me that there was something called generalization that a lot of people on the spectrum struggle with, which means if you teach somebody to do one thing, like put a t-shirt on, they cannot then take a sweatshirt and put it on, thinking it's something completely different. They don't see the similarities and generalize. And she was so excited because she was able to say that my son could generalize and how amazing that was going to be. And it has been amazing.
Right.
It has really helped, but I've had to use that in the helping. So instead of saying, okay, we're putting on a sweatshirt now, we're going to start from zero and teach you all over again, it was like, you know how you put on a t-shirt?
Right.
It's very similar. So, you know, giving him the little steps, giving him the pathway.
I mean, completely off topic, but that's a very... I hadn't really heard about that. And that explains a lot of the way that I explain things.
Getting back to our stories, there is no expiration date on your healing journey.
Right.
There is no expiration date on being able to forgive your abuser. And there's definitely no expiration date on finding your new path. Everybody's journey is going to be a little different. It has to be that way. You can't follow in somebody else's footsteps because we're also very unique and have different unique needs.
Right. And I think something that we mentioned is the concept of the journey is so vague.
Yes.
I think a lot of people kind of think of like the hero's journey.
Oh,
the literary device where it's like you have the beginning, the middle, the end, blah, blah, blah. And life isn't like that. There's not...
It's not like a movie wrapped up in 2 hours.
Right. It's not... There's not a final destination that you have to reach. There's not anything like that. Your life is one of those franchises that just keeps making sequels for forever. It's just like, why doesn't this end? But yeah, there's just not... It's not like that, and it's not a point where you can fail to get to your ending.
Right.
It's just cyclical. It's not a little roadmap. That's not even I'm gesturing here, but I'm thinking of also just like the plot map where it's just like a squiggly line, basically.
It's not linear. It's more like a spider web.
Yeah. I mean, you go in cycles.
Kind of like with grief. you're going through a grieving process, they've got the
Right.
stages of grief, but you can bounce back and forth. You can be, you mean denial and then get angry and then go back to denial. You
Right.
bounce around.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever heard this one, but there's something that people say about grief where it's like grief never leaves you, but it stays the same size while you grow around it.
Yes.
And I feel like trauma's kind of the same way. Like, it still exists. Even if you put all this effort into healing, it still exists within you. Sometimes it'll still hit you. But in the grand scheme of things, yeah, you're doing better.
And when it comes to healing from abuse is including components of grieving.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you're grieving the loss of the life you thought you had, or the life you never will have.
Yes.
Or there's just various forms, but it is a form of grief. So it's going to be bouncing around through the different stages of grief, plus more other things.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so much grief involved with everything. I mean, grief is involved with if you are disabled, which a lot of people who go through abuse and trauma are disabled.
Right.
Whether it's what made them a victim or just the result of being a victim.
Yeah, since I have lupus,
yes,
I was really surprised when I first discovered that lupus can be not created, but definitely fed by toxic environments.
Yes.
And that made a lot of sense.
Yes.
And when I got out of my toxic environment, I've been doing better.
Way better. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of issues, some diagnosed, some not, that when you're free of stress, it really is a lot better.
Yep, it is.
At the end of the day, a lot of victims of abuse do walk away with these scars and with things like disabilities, which also involve a whole grieving process.
Exactly.
And the mental effect. There's so much that your life, it just never will look like the ideal that, you were raised to expect.
Right. I know when my kids were all little and I was just entering the world of autism, there was a poem that was super popular at the time. It was called Welcome to Holland, and it's all about you're planning this trip to go to Italy and you're so excited about going to Italy and you're ready for the fashion and the fast cars and all the food, and then you get off the plane and the people say welcome to Holland and you're not in Italy, and how it's not the journey you were expecting and everything's gonna be different, but how it's lovely in its own way. There's wooden shoes and tulips and windmills, and it's a slower pace maybe, or just a different speed altogether, but it's still a nice journey. And I think
never heard of this poem.
I loved it. I just thought it was good to show how expectations sometimes have to change.
It's a weird process having to kind of figure out, okay, my idea of happiness has to change.
Exactly. I mean, that kind of goes back with, I thought I had the job I was going to have until I died.
Yeah.
Maybe not that dramatic. And I was happy.
Yeah.
I was happy in that job, but things changed.
Right.
And it's just part of the journey.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a word for journey that's not journey.
Oh, yes. I can't pronounce it.
Peregrination.
Mm-hmm.
And the definition is a long, meandering journey. Peregrination. Let's say it all together.
No. Peregrination.
Yeah, you almost got it.
Peregrination.
You did. Peregrination.
Yay.
It's a little more all-encompassing than just journey.
Right.
When you're dealing with the journey of healing from abuse, it's going to be long and meandering and take you to paths you weren't expecting. It's not point A to point B.
Yeah, and this is something that I've honestly been thinking about very recently, because the past few days I've been like really tired.
Yes.
And I have certain things that make me more down sometimes.
Of course.
And I've been struggling the past couple weeks I had been pretty physically active, and then suddenly I just haven't been, and it's been really hard to kind of get me back out And that's always such a disappointing feeling. But it's one of those things where when talking about physical activity, people are like, if you aren't constantly physically active, then it's harder for you to get back to it, right? Like, it's hard to get back to the gym if you don't go for a few days. And, like, you just have to have the willpower to go through it. Well, I have ADHD and physical illness and all these things. Right. That willpower I have a much smaller reserve of it. So sometimes it does look like I haven't been walking around as much and haven't been going out and haven't been doing my push-ups. But
which I'm keeping track of all of that.
Right. For sure. Like, I just kind of look back to when I was, like, really sick. I was pretty much homebound for half a year in high school. I was just so...
Had to do homeschooling.
Or
home-based schooling. Something like that.
It was called homebound, which is probably why I said homebound. But I wasn't going out at all. I was barely able to go up and down the stairs sometimes. And it wasn't anything that was diagnosed.
Right.
I had nothing diagnosed. There was...
We had doctors saying... It's anxiety and stress, but that doesn't help.
Yeah, I had one doctor who I went to, and I tried to explain. She didn't really listen, and she just said, "Okay, it's anxiety. Have some anxiety medication."
Yeah,
and that didn't go well. But the other doctors that we were going to, because I have stomach problems.
Right.
The gastroenterologist, it was kind of like, we were trying to find things and we see symptoms of something being wrong.
Right.
They could see the symptoms. They could see the inflammation and all of this, but they couldn't find out the cause. The point is, I was very inactive. And I've still, from that point, gotten to where I am, or where I was 3 weeks ago when I was being super physically active.
Yeah.
And I'm not near that level again right now. There are so many skills and tools that I've learned along the way that keep me at a better baseline.
Oh, okay.
Like, my baseline's higher than it was in high school. I still have dips, and those dips still feel bad, but it's not a failure. And even if my baseline goes up and down a little bit, that just happens.
Right.
And I know that I'll be able to get up again. And I left that period of my life where I was always home, and I went straight to college.
Right.
So, because that was my senior year of high school. And I went to college where I was having to walk everywhere. I was away from my parents. And I mean, it was only an hour and a half drive away. And I just remember being so terrified because I was like, I cannot do this. But I also remember the very first day where I was just kind of out on a walk. This wasn't the first day of college, but I had been going to classes a little bit and doing stuff. And I just remember it was the first day that I ran.
Oh, okay.
In probably a year. And I just did a little jog. And that was the best feeling I had ever had. I was so happy. And
you were releasing the endorphins.
It wasn't even that. It was, I literally just jogged or ran down a street because I was happy.
Aww.
I was just really excited. My body is working again.
Yes.
I will never probably be to the same physical ability that I was before then. I don't think, my body's never going to be normal.
Well, what is normal?
Well, okay, but it's never going to be perfectly healthy.
Yes.
And
understood.
I'm never going to have the same ability that non-disabled people have. And accepting that. It's not about wanting to be socially accepted. It's about the personal accepting.
Right. That's very much how our healing peregrination is.
Our healing peregrination.
Have you felt that you were ever rushed to heal quickly?
Yeah, I feel like I felt that way even moving here because my situation has been a little different than yours. There was the expectation that I move here and immediately get a job, immediately go back to college to graduate. I need to get a place to stay in. There's a lot of these outside pressures that have been okay, you gotta get moving. And, the thing is with this healing, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of effort. And college also takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. You know, I've definitely felt that I've put a lot of healing on the back burner.
Right.
Whilst, like, being like, okay, I just gotta get through college.
Right.
I think ultimately I've been trying to be more kind to myself. Like, okay, I've had to put it back, so it is gonna go slow. And it is gonna affect things like college and my career, because there's unhealed stuff going on here.
And they're big things.
And they're big things.
Yeah.
And there's things like the undiagnosed ADHD that I had.
Right.
You know, there was just a lot. And I mean, even before I moved out here, I just remember you told me everything over spring break. And you had a whole plan. You were...
I did.
You really plotted out how... Because it was like we would have a couple of fun days.
And then
you would tell me, and then I would have days to process and not be alone and have you around, and then go back home, because it was like 6 days that I was here, maybe 5 days, I don't know. Even then, 2 or 3 days isn't enough to process or to heal. And again, this is not at all your fault. I'm glad you told me. But...
yeah, there are no secrets.
No. I came back from spring break, and that Monday I had to go student teach. I had to be in front of a classroom of 20 children.
Right.
And I was not feeling it. But it was such a moment of like, I just have to get over it. Let's go.
Well, that's how my peregrination was, because when I first started learning about the different abuses from your father, it wasn't like I learned everything at once.
Right.
It was like months of the slow leaking of information. Yeah. And in that time, I was trying to not let you guys know something was going on. I was trying to be normal at work.
Yeah.
And it was such a monumental effort to do that.
Yes, it really is.
It's exhausting to try to act normal.
Right.
When you feel like your world's crashing down upon you, but you still have to smile and...
Right. Because at that point, it's not even healing. That's like, you've been stabbed. You have a big gaping wound that is bleeding out, and you have to find a way to bandage it so that you don't show the blood.
Right. Yeah, we'll worry about healing later. Yeah.
Right. So, but in that moment, it's like, okay, come on, just heal already. Like, just heal. But it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't. And I felt rushed to heal quickly by my abuser.
Wow, yeah.
He was pushing for me to forgive him before I even knew the whole story.
Right.
So he just wanted to wipe the slate clean and go on. And I just couldn't do that. And that's weird for a marshmallow like me. Normally I'd be like, oh, okay, it's okay.
Right.
And just let's move on from here. But finding out more and more stuff, there was the financial abuse, there was the secrets, there was all these discoveries of how deep the abuse was. How can you forgive when you don't know everything there is?
Yeah, and these are definitely wounds that are too deep.
Right.
Like, it's not just like, well, I'm sorry I said something annoying to you this one time. Like, this is an extremely sexist man.
Yes.
So he does not view us as women as being the same level of human as he. Something that I think of a lot with when we're talking about misogyny and stuff like that, because that has a huge role in a lot of abuse. Not that women can't abuse, obviously, but like there is kind of the moral standard, which is the mechanism of abuse, which is he doesn't see us as people who he has to have his morals as high for. So it's kind of like when you're interacting with a cat or a dog, you don't hold yourself to the same moral standard as you would if you're interacting with a person, because like I'll sit there and be like, oh, you're a little dummy when I'm talking to an animal, because they don't understand. And you say, as long as you say it in a loving voice, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But, I wouldn't say that to a person.
Right.
And that is how he views and treats us, like an animal.
Yes, belonging.
Yes. Again, with the animal example, like when we've had cats that like lashed out at us because like, you know, we try to put them in the carrier or whatever, we're kind of like, okay, come on, forgive me.
Right.
Right? Because it's like, okay, I know better than you.
Right.
It's literally fine.
Right.
And I put, you know, this was to go to the vet, which is for your own good. And in these cases, it's absolutely true. We can't force them to forgive us, obviously. It's a cat. You know, there is kind of that feeling of like, oh, she's still hiding under the bed, you know?
Yep.
Oh, it takes so long for her to get over this. That's kind of how I imagine he feels about us.
Interesting, yeah.
Because, yeah, I had the same thing where, you know, he was texting me like, are you going to forgive me yet? Like, haven't you forgiven me?
Oh, okay. How long did you go before you cut him off?
I didn't go very long. I was pretty happy to cut him off.
I know you talked to him a couple of times.
I talked to him a few times. One of those times was when he was texting me like, you know, when will you forgive me? When will you come home? Whatever. I was just like, dude, I said something about like, I don't have like a timer for healing from my trauma.
But you didn't say it quite that politely.
No, I didn't. I did not talk to him very politely.
Which I enjoyed.
Yeah, she always enjoyed that. Yeah, I mean, I always felt like he has no idea, no concept of...
None at all.
Like, hey, this is an actual wound to heal from.
Right.
It's just something that they just need to get over it.
Right. And he pushed forgiveness so hard and so fast.
And once again, we have to do a spiritual abuse
yes.
episode. Because it's always like, you need to forgive, because that's what the Bible tells us to do, is be forgiving.
Right. And they say forgiveness is not for the perpetrator, it's for the victim.
Mm.
And I agree.
Yeah.
But it can't be forced.
Right.
And our abuser he was telling me that, and I'm sure this is a lie because he is a pathological liar. He said his therapist was questioning the ability of my therapist because it was taking me so long to heal.
Right.
This was 1 month after I left him.
God.
And I still didn't know everything. I still didn't know. I mean, I still don't.
Right.
But I was still to learn more at that point in time. And he pulled out the old authority figure that my therapist thinks you need a different therapist.
Yeah.
Because you should have gotten over it already and be forgiving me. And it's just like, I don't think any therapist is going to say that.
Nope.
No. It is not a one size fits all.
Right. And therapy isn't about like just going in and getting fixed immediately.
Right. And forgiveness is not the goal.
Right. Forgiveness is like, especially with like healing and stuff like that. Like there is no way that we could forgive him in a way that would then make it okay for us to stay with him.
Exactly.
Whether or not, you know, I wouldn't say I forgive him, to be honest.
Right.
I've washed my hands of him. Bye.
I would say I have forgiven him mostly.
Yeah. I'd say I've forgiven him to the extent that I don't care what he does with his life.
Right. You're not letting it have power over you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you know, he can go thrive. I don't care if he does heal from his own issues and moves on and lives the rest of his life happily. That's fine. I don't think that that's something, like, I wouldn't hear that he's like married somebody and try to go mess that up.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, I wouldn't like be like that.
It's interesting. Somebody did ask me once when I decided to leave, because I really struggled with divorce.
Yeah.
And someone asked me, how would you feel if he got remarried or was just in another relationship? And I was like, oh, relieved. Is that bad?
You wanted to leave you alone, yeah.
I don't want to be his supply for his narcissistic tendencies.
Right.
Let someone else do that.
Yeah, I think for me, I would be like concerned for the person.
Yes.
Like, I hope he is actually better, but I'm apart from that. You know, I'm
right. And see how strong that is. how far you've gone in your healing.
Yeah, I've kind of been like that from the start. I don't know if that's strength or just I like to just be like, okay, bye. Wipe my hands off.
But I was so proud of you when you set your boundaries.
Yeah.
I remember the first time you talked to him, you had said, I love you, but I'm disappointed in you, and I don't want to talk to you for like a couple days or so. Like, you were so strong and powerful, and again, you were choosing what was best for you. You were taking power of your own agency, and that's so important.
Well, thank you.
Whereas I was like, I had to have people surrounding me and helping me.
Right. Well,
because he was constantly...
Yeah.
Aren't you done yet? Aren't you done yet? Forgive me. I said I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it takes. 30 years of abuse, but I said I'm sorry.
Right. I think there was probably more pressure on you, for sure. And you also had to keep an open stream of communication because my younger brother was a minor still.
Right.
So there was a lot of extra elements. But I also had people, you obviously were supporting me. And then I had friends who were, there for me. And
so what has been your biggest stumbling block for your journey? Sorry, your peregrination.
Yeah, sorry. My peregrination. I think there's a lot of, unfortunately, realistic factors that can get in the way.
Like what?
Like I was saying, like, I did have to go and get a job, and I did have to go to college, and especially with our financial abuse, unfortunately, that is a very real issue that does cause a stumbling block with healing. What has been your biggest stumbling block?
Well, other than my abuser.
Well, yeah.
I think it's... We talk a lot about generational differences.
Right.
And I think my generation was accepting of therapy, but we grew up with parents that didn't accept therapy.
Right.
So it's kind of like, just move on, just move past it. And carry on, soldier on. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. I have PTSD, as I've mentioned before. Mm-hmm. I started doing EMDR therapy for it, which has been wonderful. But when I first heard about EMDR, they talked about it can be effective in as little as 3 sessions. I was like, awesome.
Right.
And then when I talked to somebody about it, she was like, no, that's like for a single incident. That's like for you had a traumatic car accident you need help getting over.
Yeah.
Yours is complex.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the best way to describe all of it. It's complex.
Right.
There's just so much.
And I mean, you literally have CPTSD, right? Not PTSD.
No, I have CPTSD.
Yeah, so it's complex PTSD.
It is. And I feel like when we're talking about your entire lifetime in this environment, a lot of my lifetime, the majority of my lifetime in this environment, there are so many things that still pop up that I've forgotten.
Right.
Memories just pop up and it's like, oh my gosh, now I look at it and think, that was just wrong.
Right.
And at the time, he just explained it away, or I just tried to explain it away, whatever, I tried to bury it. So I think the stumbling block is I try to push past all that, and then I'm always surprised when it comes up.
And that's also a symptom of PTSD.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have PTSD. It doesn't seem so. I feel like for me it is kind of tripping up over some of those skills that I feel like I wasn't taught growing up, from like the physical things like not knowing how to ride a bike or how to drive a car, but also stuff that's like, oh, I need to relearn like how to handle friendships. I need to relearn how to handle family relationships. Even my relationship with you, I feel like I've, had some things that I've been grappling with. Not anything about you. It's not you, it's me.
No, I don't want to hear that.
But we talked about it in one of the previous episodes. Like, I still feel like I need permission to do anything.
Right.
And that's not something that you have enforced. Right. That is entirely my own brain saying I can't do anything without permission.
Because we were in an environment.
Right.
Where you had to have I had to have permission to be late coming home from work. When I'd walk out the door, any of us,
Yes.
when we walk out the door, we had to explain to people where we were going,
Right.
who we would be with, and when we'd be back.
Yes.
And this is, even for me as an adult, a grown adult,
Right.
as I'm walking out, I would have to answer to my husband and my mother-in-law who sat right by the front door.
Right.
And you had to give like a report, and you couldn't just like step out for a moment.
No. I always had to explain, like, I'm going for a walk.
Then you have to explain why. It's like, let me just go.
Yeah, let me just go on a walk.
Yeah.
So, like, there's things like that, again, I don't necessarily recognize as, like, a weak point until suddenly it becomes a problem.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, this is an issue. Part of what was funny was I realized that even when I wasn't asking you for permission, I would still kind of subtly ask, like, a friend for permission.
Would you
Like,
really?
I mean, I would, I never phrase it as, like, can I be allowed to do that? But, like...
I was the same way.
Yeah.
When we first moved here, I would never walk to the end, past the end of the street, because when I was a child here, that was our barrier.
Right.
And it was like, here I am an adult, I'm 56, I almost said I was 57, 56, and I can't walk down the street
Right.
without asking permission.
Right.
And there is no people to ask permission from.
Right.
It was like, I have to like just accept the fact that I have freedom.
Right.
Which is kind of a bizarre concept.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's really weird. I mean, like, again, that's something that I do. I also will always, like, before I go for a walk to, like, the street nearby with businesses on it, I always will tell you.
Yeah, you do. And there is a nice thing about...
Like, obviously, there is an element of safety.
Right,
There is an element
right.
of all of this.
And I'll tell you, hey, I've got a doctor's appointment tomorrow, or, we're family,
Like,
so
yes,
we check in.
There's absolutely, like, a use of it, but
But if I were to go knock on your door and you weren't there, I wouldn't panic and
Right.
be like, oh no.
right. A big thing that I always asked for permission for was when I was still in school, I would ask if I could skip class because I was feeling bad.
Right.
And, like, that was something, you got that phone call so many times
Yep.
where I'd be like, I feel really bad. Do you think it'd be okay for me to miss class today? And this is not anything you had this was college.
Yeah. You needed somebody to say, you make the best decision for you.
Yes. And I still struggle with that.
Yeah.
But again, that was something that I would also text my friends, like, I feel really bad today. Do you think it would be okay if I skip class? There's a lot of little skills like that you don't think of as a skill. The skill of, like, practicing that autonomy. I know that's something that my younger brother also has been, I know in one of his IEPs, that was one of the things that they said he needs to practice, like, self-advocacy.
Self-advocacy, absolutely.
And things like that, like, outside of the sphere of, like, an IEP for an autistic child. You don't necessarily think of those as skills.
I want an IEP for me. An IEP for life.
Yeah. Anyways.
I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks for our healing peregrination is, again, seeing abuse for what it was.
Right.
And acknowledging its effects.
Right.
Because I so often try to just power through
Yeah.
and go on and just say, well, this happened, but I'm not in that situation anymore. I still have to not just see it.
Right.
To see the whole story. I need to acknowledge that it affected me.
Right. Yeah. Not to call you out.
You can call me out all you want.
But that is something that I do have to say to you, like, okay, Mom, gee, I wonder why you're feeling bad when you've done this and this and this and you had this experience. And,
Yeah.
that is something that becomes a problem, especially when it relates to, like, physical, what you're able to physically do.
Yeah.
But I feel like, for me, I feel like I'm the extremes of that.
What do you mean?
Where I will be either like, yeah, sure, I had abuse or whatever in my past, but it's fine now, so I should just totally be able to do this. Or I'll be on the other opposite of the spectrum where I'm like, I can't do that. I was traumatized. And it'll be like a little too far.
I think both ways are valid, though. That's
Yes.
where you are right then.
Yes, but I think there are things that in my past I kind of delayed my healing because I was like, I'm too traumatized. I can't do that.
Oh, interesting.
I think especially before I learned about the stuff with that, I was probably worse about stuff then because that was all like very vague, mysterious, like, I just have a lot of physical and mental issues.
Right. You couldn't put your finger on the cause.
Yes. And so I'd be like, there's no way I can do a 3-hour car ride.
Right.
Things like that where I was just like, I cannot do it. And then I would have to do it. And then I would be, because I couldn't open my mind to like, and again, that's not entirely my fault. I was still under abuse.
Yes.
But I think this is just an example of, because I couldn't even think that I might be capable of something like that, trying it again would then traumatize me more because I was in such fear the entire time. Mm-hmm. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So this is also just a thing of like, if you're not ready for something, like it, not even like a personal, like open your mind up. But like, if you're not ready for something, but you want to heal past it and you just like throw yourself at it, that will traumatize you more. It's kind of like exposure therapy for a phobia.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like my abuser telling me, get over it, give me now. That made it worse.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
If you did say, okay, I'll forgive you, even when you weren't ready, if you went back into it terrified of him and terrified of what he was doing, everything would be so much worse.
Yes.
That would not be good for your mental state.
Right. The fact that I was able to plainly say, I'm not ready to forgive you, mm-hmm. was a huge thing for me.
Yeah.
Because it would have been so easy to just be like, oh, okay, even though I hadn't.
Right.
And so that was a huge thing for me and my power.
Right.
That I could say, no, I'm not ready to forgive you. And I did finally tell him that I forgave him at one point in time. And that doesn't mean that I let him off the hook.
Right.
That doesn't mean that I absolve him for any responsibility for his abuse. It just means I'm not going to let him have that power over me.
Right. I mean, obviously it's a very complicated topic, so I don't have like a specific moral to give.
No.
But
I think mainly I want our listeners to know their journey is going to look different than our journey.
Yeah.
And their journey is going to look different than anyone else's.
Yeah.
Peregrination. And it's okay. And you can't follow a roadmap because it might not apply to you.
Yeah. And it will be okay. I think
yes. And the main thing from the beginning topic was there is no expiration date.
Right.
I mean, I honestly feel like it's something I will probably... We have some very drastic abuse we have to work with.
Yeah.
It is going to be something that we will grapple with possibly the rest of our lives.
Oh, yeah. It's going to define us.
But it's also going to get easier.
Yes.
It's going to lessen. It's going to look different. And going back to the whole grieving process, same kind of thing as with grief. Like, as time goes by, there's more distance.
Right.
The edges get softer. It just gets a little easier to deal with. You still need to be aware of what's going on.
For sure. Yeah. I was going to say the trauma, the abuse that I was raised in is always going to be a piece of me. But like you said, with the grief analogy, like I'm growing around it.
Right.
And how I choose to grow around it is kind of what actually defines my future, I guess.
I lost my brother to COVID. Mm-hmm. And that was at the very beginning of all of this landslide of events. And that was in 2020.
Last few days of 2020.
Yeah, to make it even worse, it was Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve.
Yes, 2020.
Yes. Before any of the vaccines came out even.
Right, they were just rolling them out. His birthday was the day after mine.
Right.
So growing up, it was just like a joke that I was the birthday present he never asked for because I was born the day before his third birthday.
Right.
And we were always very close. And without fail, we talked to each other on our birthdays, no matter where we were. That was a thing. And he was always off skiing because that was his exciting thing. He got to ski for free on his birthday. So he would always go. The first time my birthday rolled around, I was a complete mess.
Right.
The second year, I was a complete mess. But now, the next year was a little better.
Yeah.
And this past year, I certainly thought about him on my birthdays, but it was one of the first days that I didn't feel overwhelmingly sad.
Right.
I was able to more remember him with a smile and the good times, and there was that distance. I had grown around it. I think that's just a great way to look at it. It's been absorbed into my life.
I know with PTSD and stuff like that, there is a similar, even if there isn't a date that you remember, your body still kind of remembers the time that it took place in, and so people will talk about how they feel worse around the time that a certain event happened to them. And I think it's kind of similar. I kind of felt that way about springtime.
Because that's when I told you.
Yes. Again, not your fault. It just happened to be when it happened. I always laugh about phrasing it this way, but I ran away from home that day, that I came back from California,
You never really returned to the house in Texas.
We'll have to talk about that. That's a whole story about when I broke in afterwards.
You had your little Mission Impossible day.
Yeah, I had to collect some stuff. But yeah, I landed in Texas. My friend's mom drove me to my house. I went in. I got my birth certificate, my social security, whatever, my most essential things, and never saw my dad again. And yeah, I mean, that's a lot. That was, people talk about moving out of their childhood home and how that can even have a certain level of grief.
Yeah.
And I had to just run and leave my cats behind.
Yeah.
And, so the point of that was I have felt in the past couple of years like springtime is like,
Makes sense. It brings up feelings.
Yeah, this spring hasn't been too bad.
Oh, good.
So similar thing, like it's kind of like we just keep. I only just thought of that just now. When the last couple of years I was thinking about it.
Yeah. We're getting healthy.
Yay!
Which is awesome. Okay.
But there's still bad days, and that's still okay.
Of course. Again, the journey is never straight.
Peregrination.
The peregrination is not straight. It is not linear. It is up and down and all over the place. If you graph it out, it looks like a spider web. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up for today. Until we talk to you guys next time, just remember, like Dorothy, there's no place like home.
And home is where there are no deadlines.
I like it.